everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today, oh boy, yes, that's right, we're back to the Captain Marvel news because now we are getting word that the so-called biggest opening ever. Oh my gosh, this movie is going to make so much money. Oh my gosh, seriously, guys, it's going to be a gigantic, huge opening. It's not going to be nearly as big as they once thought. So, as reported here by Variety, it says Captain Marvel's eyes heroic 100 million plus opening weekend, written here by Rebecca Rubin. And there have just been some really funny headlines for this. Like, just seriously, Captain Marvel box office. Like, I just want to show you some of these headlines because they've been absolutely hilarious here, because they are so, if you did not think that there was some kind of bias, if you did not think that they were trying to prop this movie up, like, seriously, just look at some of the titles. So look, Disney's Captain Marvel flying towards $100 million opening, tracking for a marvelous $100 million plus opening. Could save the 2019 box office. Yes. Oh, yes, indeed. And seriously, that's what they're going with here. They're literally trying to spin this as much as they possibly can to try and make it seem like it's going to be the biggest weekend ever. But here's the problem. Let's go back to this. Oh, wait a minute. We can't talk about this. We can't talk about this, guys. No. Box Office Pro, they're not a real website. I mean, seriously, they're not a real website. This was back in January. You can't bring this up. Oh, yes, I can, because you ran with this story. That's right, all you media shills out there who are trying to say, oh, man, Captain Marvel is set to be the biggest ever because, oh, the pre-sale tickets are amazing. It's outpacing Black Panther. It's outpacing, Infinity War. It's outpacing all of these movies. It's going to be gigantic and huge. Oh, my gosh, and now we've got Box Office Pro, and now they're saying $140 to $180 million. Oh, yes, it's going to be gigantic. And oh, wait a minute, $160 million. Oh, yes, with a $465 million domestic prediction. That was what they were running with. Like, little over a couple weeks ago, that was the story. That was the narrative that they were running with. Oh, how the tables have turned, because obviously $160 million might be fine and dandy. Oh, it could make upwards of $180 million. Well, now it's looking at between 80 and 120. That is the new range that they are giving us, and it's so funny that they're still trying to act like, oh, well, compared to other films, it's still really high, and so it's still impressive. Oh, I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, she's a new hero. People don't know who she is, and that's okay. So $100 million really isn't that bad. It's not bad. I'm not trying to say that $100 million, if it makes $100 million, that is just total garbage, because keep this in mind. Wonder Woman, when that movie came out, made $103 million in its opening weekend, and by all accounts, that was a successful movie. It made over $870 million worldwide, which is something that Captain Marvel could only ever pray to whatever gods they pray to, that would actually be a possibility at this point for them. I honestly think that everything that's been coming out with Brie Larson, all the coverage of everything that Brie Larson has been saying, not only just by people like me and bigger channels on YouTube, but also even by the mainstream media. The fact that they've picked up these stories and try to act like, oh, these are great things. Everyone's going to love the fact that she hates white men. Everyone's going to love the fact that she cares about who's interviewing her, and how, oh, wait a minute, you're a white man. Oh, no, never mind. I'm going to go to someone else. Keep in mind that it's not bad for you to go to various people to be interviewed. But when you go on record trying to say that, oh man, I am just so high and mighty that I'm just going to, reach out my heart to the little people, and I'm going to help the disenfranchised because I'm a rich whammon, and I want you instead to pay to see my movie, and I want you all to pay to support these GoFundMes to go see my movie and support myself, even though I could fund it myself, etc. I mean, that's just what she does. I mean, she thinks of herself so much. She is a typical Hollywood elite. She thinks that every door should just be magically open for her. It can't be opened by a man because obviously we can't have that. Oh no, that would be misogynistic apparently. But seriously, she wants everything just magically opened for her, and everything's going to be great and wonderful. And if anyone doesn't like the movie, if anyone says a negative thing, if they're a white man, she does not give a damn about their opinion. And I'm sorry, but that's just ridiculous, seeing that the vast majority of people going to see your movie in the United States are going to be white men, or at least it would have been until you basically piss them all off. Like, seriously, go check out, IGN did a tweet earlier today, and they asked about the Captain Marvel, and almost every single comment, 90+% of the comments were all saying, yeah, I'm not down. Yeah, she doesn't want me to go. She's already made it very clear that she doesn't care about white men, so why would I go? Well, I'm obviously not welcome there. And I think it's hilarious to see just how many people don't want to see this movie, and now we're starting to see the numbers back that up. Again, it went from $160 million at the very least, mid-range, $160 million, $140 to $180 million. I mean, it could be upwards of $180 million opening, $100 million. Again, In and of itself, that is not a bad number. But in comparison to the others, seeing that was around a 35% drop, that's really bad. Keep this in mind. If we see a 35% drop in its opening weekend, and based on these ranges and the multiple factors that they were basing it on, that is how they got this $465 million domestic total. So if we use the same logic and we say, okay, if it's 35%, down around 35% at $100 million, if it even makes $100 million, we say 35% down, well, then that would mean that the overall projection for the domestic total would therefore be closer to 30 to 35% down too, right? Okay, well, that brings it well below $400 million domestically, which means that this film is very likely just going to be stuck around the $500 to $600 million range at best. According to my earlier predictions and my earlier calculations, you've been following me on Twitter, I've been trying to crunch some numbers for you throughout the day. I was around $530 million just based on this projection alone, assuming that you have a foreign total that either matches or slightly exceeds this total, which, based on the fact that this film is not going to have just a massive amount of people going to support it overseas, there's just really no evidence to support that. Everything that we know about it, everything that we've seen from previous films, it just doesn't really seem that is going to be the case. So the best you can do then is just to double that. Just assume that the foreign total is going to either match, if not barely exceed it, and you're stuck around this $530 million range, which is far, far from the $700+ million range that they were predicting for a worldwide total beforehand. And it's hilarious to me to see all this crumble apart. I mean, seriously, as the old saying goes, get woke, go broke. And I'm not saying that this film is going to be a bust. I'm not saying that this film is going to flop. I think there's a potential for this film to flop, and we'll know for a fact. We will know better. If this film only makes $85 million, and if we see a 60% drop from week 1 to week 2, this film is indeed going to be a flop. If we don't see that, then this film is going to barely break even, maybe make a very, very small profit. Because even if it does make that $530 million profit, let's say it makes the $530 million worldwide, okay, well, it only gets 60% of the net gross, the net profit. It only needs to make $400 million just to break even, which means that as $130 million, if it made $530 million, that'd be $130 million added to the $400 million, meaning you have $130 million there in net profit, but it only gets 60% of that, and so therefore you're looking at a sub-$100 million profit for this film. Oh yeah, that would be wonderful. That would be that'd be so huge, it'd be gigantic. Oh my gosh, it would show everything and everyone. So the question is asked, well, why is this number dropping? Why is it now at $100 million? Why is it no longer at the 160 to 180 million? I think that a lot of factors are at play here. For starters, that first number that we got here, the long-range tracking, was an early prediction. Again, it was from January. It was based off of how many people, seriously, this is how they get it to. This is how they make up this number. It was based on how many people watched the trailer within the first 24 hours. It was based on, ticket sales and the rate of tickets being sold within the first week or so. And that's how they got this huge number, because everyone was apparently buying tickets like crazy. But as we learned from Solo Star Wars Story, just because you have rates that are higher than other previous films does not mean that you're going to have an end result the same way. Solo lost $200 million at the box office, barely made $400 million worldwide, didn't even make $400 million worldwide, and is by all accounts a giant flop. I don't think Captain Marvel is going to find itself in the same boat, because it's not following a disaster like Solo did when it came to The Last Jedi. However, I think that what you have here is also a lot of people seeing Captain Marvel, seeing Brie Larson on the press junket, saying all these things about white men and how this is her, this is the way that she's going to be an activist. This is her activism is going out and supporting this film and trying to make sure that all the little women in the United States get to go see it, but she's not going to pay a damn penny of her own money to support it. Oh no, she's going to let other people pay money so that way she gets more of their money in the process. You see how it works here? You see why she's just a typical Hollywood liberal? You see why she's just a typical Hollywood elitist who really does not care about anyone else but herself? She does not care about anyone else but herself. And you know what? If she was at least honest with that, hey, you know what? Everyone is going to be different. And obviously, I think there's some bad things to say about that. But at least then she would be honest. Now it's just she's in this pace and she's in this position where she's trying to act, holier than thou. And she's shown herself just to be a complete and utter hypocrite when it comes to it. But as you see, they're totally just pulling this up. The domestic box office is in desperate need of a hero. So far this year has seen a steady decline in ticket sales compared to 2018. That's where Brie Larson's Captain Marvel can step in. Disney and Marvel's first female-led superhero adventure is tracking for an opening weekend of $100 million according to early estimates. With 3 weeks to go until Captain Marvel hits theaters on March 8th, some box office watchers suggest enthusiastic word of mouth could propel that figure to north of $120 million. Yeah, that would require a lot of positive word of mouth. Keep this in mind. Just because this movie is going to guarantee to get 95% plus from the critics, just because 95% plus of critics are going to give this a positive review on Rotten Tomatoes and other sites like it, that does not mean that people are going to show up for it. Remember that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse got very, very positive ratings from critics and audiences, did not nearly make as much money as you would think from the amount of positive buzz. So positive buzz itself does not guarantee ticket sales. What this means is that people are going to want to see this movie or not based on what we see in the trailer and based on who is in the movie that they want to see. Brie Larson is not a household name. Brie Larson is not a name that most people are going to be able to recognize. She's not like a Robert Downey Jr. She is not like at this point, Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth. I mean, the reason why those films sell more than they did originally is because now people know their names more. The same theoretically could happen to Captain Marvel. The difference is that Captain Marvel and Brie Larson have made it very clear where they fall politically, and not just that, they've wanted to try and be able to basically fusion dance together the movie and the real life personality as one. And that's something where the other actors who've been in the MCU have been able to kind of distance that. Yes, a lot of them, I would say all of them, are some kind of form of liberal or some kind of form of woke progressive. However, none of them have tried to really mix the two together. The closest would be Chris Evans, but even Chris Evans, I have to actually go out of my way to look to find him saying stuff. He doesn't try and put it into the movie. But when you have trailers that are being pushed in a certain direction, when you have a hero, when you have all of these different things, let's show the boys how it's done, and being pushed as a feminist film by a feminist, third wave feminist actress, you're gonna find yourself in a very bad situation because most people don't like that. Most people don't want to be preached to. Most people don't want the possibility of being treated in that way. Don't want the possibility of having some kind of woke agenda being shown in their face for 2 hours. So even though the film might not end up being like that, even though the directors and the writers could very well be on the up and up, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen, especially since they're basing, as I said countless times before, since they're basing this off of the comic that has been rebooted at least 4 times since 2012, and with that has been totally gone in this SJW progressive agenda, which is the reason why it's failing in the first place. I don't know why in the world Marvel would think, oh, this is the person, this is the character, this is the point in time that we want to make into a movie. Because it has been a utter failure in the comic book industry, and it's guaranteed at this point to not be nearly as successful by the very fact that you went from 160 million to now $100 million. And now you've got even the shills like Scott Mendelson coming out saying that the Captain Marvel doesn't have to prove anything. Doesn't have to prove a darn thing, according to Mr. Scotty Boy Scott Mendelson. He says there's been a lot of talk over the last few days about how Captain Marvel does or doesn't mean to Hollywood, to gender representation, and to the world at large. Yes, Brie Larson is within her rights to request that the folks who cover press release conferences and interview junkets not just be mostly white dudes around my age. If she wants to use her capital to push for a more inclusive media circle, that's her prerogative, and it's a valid use of that muscle. People will proclaim outrage. Folks will complain about her being a man-hater or a reverse racist, or that Captain Marvel will destroy the MCU. The good news is that none of that will matter. Well, yes, it does. It absolutely does. When your movie is being based off of, seriously, actors' names and recognition. How often has Jude Law been really pushed as being a part of this movie? Not much at all. He's probably one of the biggest names you have in there. Samuel L. Jackson is probably the only other name that's been pushed nearly as much as Brie Larson. His character has been pushed as much as, if not maybe a little bit less than, Carol Danvers. So Jude Law would have been a great person to push, but you're not really pushing him all that much. And so therefore what you look with and what you're left with is Brie Larson. And if you look to Brie Larson and people say, oh, Brie Larson, what's going to be the first thing that comes up? Brie Larson goes woke. Brie Larson says, I don't want enough white dudes. Or Brie Larson says, I don't care what white dudes have to say about movies. She said that. She's like, I don't care what a white man has to say about A Wrinkle in Time, basically saying that white men have no valid criticisms and no valid opinions of any movies as long as that movie is done by a person of color or done by a woke feminist, etc. Oh, no, movies are made for just a small subsection of the entire population. It's not made for, mass consumption, says the person who's about to be in a Marvel film. So she thinks that she's being smart. She thinks, oh, everyone around me likes what I'm doing and everyone around me agrees with me. The mass audiences don't. And when they look to this movie, when they look up this movie, and they look at Captain Marvel, history of Captain Marvel, history of Brie Larson, some of the first things they're going to see are videos like mine. Videos like the ones that Geeks and Gamers, Ethan Van Sciver. You pick it. That's what they're going to see, and they're going to listen, and they're going to make up the minds for themselves. And I hope that many of them say, hey, wait a minute. I don't want this. I don't want Brie Larson going woke. I don't want the MCU going woke. This is the future of the MCU. Wait, this is phase 4? It's supposed to be centered around this character who's based off a 2012 comic book adaptation of the character that has failed miserably over the past several years, that has been rebooted constantly because no one wants it. That's what the future is. And not only that, but also now you've hired somebody who is as woke as the comic itself. And you expect it to do fine? You expect, oh, $100 million, that's totally fine. Oh, but don't worry, Captain Marvel's Brie Larson, she can't save womankind. She's doing the best she can, though. Because it's only womankind that they care about. She's made it very clear. That's all she cares about. She cares about minorities, women, and that's it. And she thinks that's going to be a winning combination for her, but it's not. It's not. The only reason why this film might even do slightly well is because you have someone like Samuel L. Jackson who can appeal to a wide base, who's been a part of the MCU almost from the very beginning. He's a recognizable face and character that people might say, hey, oh my gosh, I get to find out how he loses his eye? Wait a minute, he's younger? The de-aging stuff looks really cool, because it actually does. If I can say anything positive about the trailers, the de-aging, in my own opinion, looks pretty damn good. At least when it comes to Samuel L. Jackson's character. However, that is not the entire movie. That is not the entire story. The foreign market is not going to just let this happen. The foreign market is not just going to show up for this kind of political agenda, which is what it's really become. It's really being pushed by that way, by people like her. Why is it that you see going from 160 million, again, the range being 140 to 160, or rather 180, to now being 100 million with a range of 80. Again, with a range of 80 to 120 million. Again, Ethan Van Sciver has been saying 85 million is his prediction. I would say that he's probably not far off. I honestly think if this movie makes more than Wonder Woman, I will be extremely surprised. If this movie makes more than 103 million in its opening weekend, I will be shocked. I will be absolutely shocked. I think this film is going to make more between around the 90 to 95 million dollar range. To be perfectly honest, could make less, could make more. But the other reason why I'm kind of looking at this number, scratching my head, is are they trying to lower the expectations to $100 million because they want this film to be given all kinds of media attention if it makes more? Are they trying to set the bar so low that when eventually it goes past the bar, because just by the very nature it's an MCU film coming out in 2019, right before Endgame, that maybe they're hedging their bet saying, well, what if the movie is a success? Well, then maybe, just maybe, if we set the expectation at 80 to $100 million and it ends up making 140 to 160 million, then we can just spin it and try and say, everyone loves it, and oh my gosh, that means we're going to go woke, and now we have ourselves a mandate. It'll be very interesting to see what direction they take. It's going to be very interesting to see what they try and do with it. And I'm looking at all the numbers, and I'm going to make a full box office prediction video for Captain Marvel, before we even get to the opening weekend. Because once we get opening weekend and that second week, we can make a pretty confident prediction about how much it's going to make. Because most movies make 60%, around 60% of their entire gross in the first 2 weeks of release. If this film makes under $100 million, if this film has a 60% drop and only makes around 40 or less during the second week, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good at all, because if that's around 60% of the entire gross, then that means domestically you're looking at close to $300 million, roughly around $300 million just domestically. And then that means that you would expect this film, if it's going to make as much as they want it to have to make over $450, $500 million overseas, which is just not realistic when you compare this to other solo films introducing characters for the first time. So yes, they can try and spin this until they're blue in the face. But I know the numbers. Most of us know the numbers. It's very easy to look up how much previous films have made. It's very easy for us to compare this to other films. The fact that this is acting so much like Solo: A Star Wars Story did when there was a giant... that film was projected to make $140 million. And in its opening weekend, it only made like 83. 4-day weekend, it was more than that, but still, it made so much less than its projection. And my thought process is maybe, just maybe, seeing that film not only came out in the shadow of The Last Jedi, but also, too, came out in the shadow of one of the writers of the film talking about how, oh yeah, Lando Calrissian, he's a pansexual. Remember that whole thing? Remember how that came out right before, like 2-3 weeks before the movie came out? Do you think that maybe, just maybe, even though this doesn't have a Last Jedi up its sleeve, it does have a Brie Larson? And is Brie Larson and her wokeness going to be enough to possibly tank not only this film, but also the future properties of the MCU as well, post-Endgame? And dare I say it, maybe even Endgame itself. I'm not going to go that far just yet. We'll have to wait and see what the movie is, what it does at the box office, and then I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about what I think it's going to do for Endgame. But at this point, guys, it's not looking great for them. It really isn't. You know, and people try and say, oh, other films made this much money. Why why aren't you going after them? Well, once again, those movies did not have $180 million projection drop to $100 million projection. A drop of like 35%. It's amazing to me. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? I know that I tend to go a little bit longer when I do these videos now, just because I want to try and be as precise as I can. I want to try and give you as much information as I possibly can. I want to really try and break these things down. Because at the end of the day, what we have here is we have the MCU going into a possible downfall. If it can happen to Star Wars, if Star Wars can be so powerful for so long, so successful, so positive as far as making money is concerned, the MCU can see a similar fall. And if this is the beginning of that fall, and if that happens, you can come back to these videos and say, oh, Odin called it. If it doesn't happen, then hey, I'll eat crow. I've said this countless times. If I'm ever wrong on something, I will always admit it. If this film ends up being a success, hey, I'm not going to spin it. I'm not going to say that it's not a success. I'm going to, obviously if it makes very much less than the $700, $800 million that they thought this was going to make, I'm definitely going to point that out saying, well, it's definitely coming in under, under the projections that they originally had. But I've already said everything that needs to be said. This film just needs to make. So for all the trolls out there still listening, hey, this film only needs to make worldwide $400 million. That's the magic number. If it makes that, it's now paid itself off. It is now broken even. And anything up and more than that is profit. Again, you have to take 60% of whatever the end total is, and that's going to be the total profit. So let's say it makes $450 million. All right, so $400 million is breaking even. Therefore, you have $50 million left. You have to take 60% of that, and that's the profit. And that's how the box office works. But we are in a situation, at least now, where the possibility of this film even coming close to 400 million, if not just a little bit more or even less, is much more of a possibility. My range is still solid. My range is still 450 to 650, and I will give you a more accurate prediction of what I think the final box office number is going to be for it, not only domestically, but also in the total worldwide totals as well. But I would like to hear your own thoughts on this. Do you think that Brie Larson's wokeness, do you think that the way that she's been spinning this, do you think that the way that she's been going about this is hurting the property? Do you think it's hurting the IP? Do you think that this is going to hurt its opening weekend? Do you think that you could see an $80 million, $85 million opening and another 60% drop that's going to lead to this film being very anemic and only getting around 300 less, maybe even sub 300 million domestically? I mean, it's a possibility that we have to at least think about at this point, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comments below. Guys, if you like this video, smash that like button. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a subscribe. You're all amazing and beautiful people. And guys, also, 10K stream is tomorrow, starting at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be starting a 4 to 5 hour live stream, and we are still also doing our movie nights like we normally do. This week, we're watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, so that's not going to be till like 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time after I get a little bit of a break in between. But come and join us tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've already created the event, so all I need to do is click the remind button, because you know that YouTube is not going to it's not going to notify you about anything, even if you're subbed and you hit the bell and everything like that. So hit the reminder just in case, just to make sure you get that notification if you want to join us. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me today. You are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.